So ready. I was just looking. I was opening up the photos for the questions. I hope this is actually getting recorded. This is the start of the podcast.
As you can hear, this is Trevor Jaffe's voice, and you are listening to another episode of Coach's Corner. What's up, man?
What's going on? Everything's good.
People don't realize this, but we have to do a sequence before we actually start recording. And it seems like every time we start this, you're just like in fucking no man's land. I'm like, is he even watching me? Is he even paying attention to anything I'm doing right now?
I'm always bitching that multitasking is an impossible thing, that multitasking doesn't actually happen, that you're slacking in some capacity if you think you're multitasking. And everyone's like, oh, I'm a great multitasker. It's like, nah. And it's like, Tony's over there like, Trevor's not even paying attention. He doesn't even know we're going to start.
Yeah. It's true, though. Multitasking, there's people that go back and forth on it. I've heard neuroscientists talk about multitasking as something that can actually be done to a significant degree. I think it just depends on what exactly it is you're multitasking. Stuff that's already trained and autonomous, you can multitask,
There's that brain guy, Quick, the Asian dude, something Quick. There's a book, Limitless, which I've yet to read. It's in my pile of 27 books. It grows every week. I have a fascination with buying books. Jim Quick, I think is his name. And he talks.
Is an Asian guy named Jim Quick?
Asian guy named Jim Quick. And
he made that name up. You know how like you get those OnStar guys and you're like, my name's Tom. It's like, no, it's not. I feel like you just gave yourself an American name so it's easier to pronounce.
Absolutely. But he talks about neuroplasticity often. And he's always talking about how you can get the brain to do multiple tasks at the same time. Like, he's an advocate for like speed reading and stuff like that. So he tries to teach people to take out the inner monologue. Like, I'm a slow reader. I will sound out every word and pronounce every word in my head. Where Riley's like, no, if you're talking to yourself, you're only going to read as fast as you talk. I'm like, well, luckily I talk very fast. However, he talks about the fact that you can segment different actions of your brain. So maybe one day I'll actually get to his book and read it. I can come back on the podcast and explain more of it. But he's someone who also believes that you probably can multitask and that we tend to chunk things together in our minds. So if you have the ability to separate things and have them going simultaneously. He actually has a pretty interesting story. He had a traumatic brain injury at like age 5. And was told he was not going to be able to attend regular school and do things. So he became his family, and he became fascinated with brain psychology and neuroplasticity and the ability to learn, and had to reteach himself like how to read, how to learn, how to do things. And now he teaches others how to do so.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's really cool, the neuroplasticity stuff, and one of the things, a book you haven't read yet, the Deep Work book by Cal Newport, talks about, how important it is to set yourself up so that you are able to just focus on one thing. And that's how you truly get like the best work done. And that could be more from probably a creative outlet than it is from a learning outlet. But I feel like it's the same way. Like if I have things that are going to distract me while I'm reading, then that's always going to pull my mind away from something that I'm reading. To whereas like if I can just answer it right away and then completely clear off my to-do list, or don't even create a to-do list and just start reading, I feel like there's more focus, deliberate, like understanding of the stuff that I'm reading. Whereas before it would be like, I got to answer emails because I checked my phone and I know that there's unanswered emails. So while I'm reading, I can't fully grasp what I'm reading because I'm trying to think of like, man, I have these emails that I got to get to. So then you read like 10 pages and you're like, fuck did I just read?
You forget it. Yeah. This is why I read when I'm on the toilet, because that is my most uninterrupted time.
Yeah, it's true. That's probably like the most concentrated time too.
That 20 minutes like pre-workout on the bowl, no distractions, my phone's on the counter, I could just read. And that's why the book's taking so long, because that's like twice a day habits.
I noticed too, like if I get into my habits, which I have my morning routine that I do, and the reason why I like a routine is because it allows you to get focused on the task a lot faster. So if you know you're going to do it and it's something that you repeat on a daily basis, your ability to focus on that task is going to be expedited. So when I first started my morning routine, I usually read for like an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning. And initially it would be like maybe 30, 45 minutes into it, I would finally get like really focused in on what I'm reading and not be distracted. And the more I do it consistently, where I wake up at the same time, I have the same things that I have going on. Like I make a cup of coffee, I'll drink water, and then I'll sit down and read. And I turn on my lamp because I need fake sunlight because I'm
sad lamp.
my sad lamp to make me happy. So it's like faster and faster now. Now it's like, 5 minutes into reading, I'm already focused in, and that helps out a lot. And, people can knock morning routines. I've heard people make fun of Jocko because he gets up at like 4:30 and he talks about it, and they're like, you don't have to get up early. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is you set an intention for the day, and you set this routine so that your body gets used to it. And the more your body gets used to, like, this is when I wake up, this is when I do this is when I do that, then your circadian rhythms start working, completely like in unison with your body. Then it's like easier to fall asleep. Then it's easier to wake up. Now it's to the point where I really don't have to set an alarm. And I get up about 5:15 every day, and I go to bed between 9 and 10 every night.
Right. And it's clearly effective for Jocko. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has a popular podcast, a popular series of books, lecture series. I know he has a jiu-jitsu school that he's like part owner, or an MMA school or something like that. He's achieved a higher level. I think he's a brown belt, if I'm not mistaken, in jiu-jitsu. Last I heard, something like that.
He's a fucking black belt, dude.
Well, see, I haven't listened to his podcast like 2 years. I don't know. But I can tell you clearly
for a while.
I don't know, dude. I have the book. I read the book. I got a little tired of the war stories. 1802.
It's like, that Trevor Jaffe guy. I think his best total is like 1,500. It's like, what? No, he just
there was the one podcast.
5 years of work for him to get a black belt. It's just like, I guess it's brown belt.
5 years? Did he go to McDojo? It should take 10. Any Brazilian would tell you it should take at least 10.
I'm talking about there was that from one brown to black, not from white to black.
The point of it was like he's a high achiever because of his, structure, his discipline, and it's giving him the freedom, which is his book, Discipline Equals Freedom, but it's giving him the freedom to achieve everything he wants because he has that discipline. And anyone who knocks that probably isn't achieving anything, and they're actually coming from their own place of insecurity. It's like we get that all the time in the online world where someone's like, oh, this coach doesn't do this, or this coach is just putting out there, or he just wants attention. It's like, dude, I'm achieving things. I'm helping people achieve things. I'm coming from a role of servitude of helping more people do things, and it's helping me achieve things. That's what's gratifying to me. That gives me the freedom to live the lifestyle and do the things I want to do. And that's how I'm not at Jocko's level as far as, accomplishments, but it's given him the freedom to do what he wants to do, which is grapple, exercise. Yeah. I think he has like an energy drink. He's got a coffee company. He's got the Ghee company
brand and stuff.
Yeah.
He does a lot, man.
An incredible amount of things. And how many people has he inspired to take charge of their own life? So if somebody's knocking that, it's coming from their own insecurities.
Yeah. I always find it weird when people knock, but I guess, because I make fun of guys like Gary Vee and David Goggins for their motivational stuff. People love David Goggins, but after reading his book, I'm not a huge fan of his. But, I feel like they just talk.
Whereas, you don't have to like the guy to appreciate the message.
Yeah, you have to first.
No, you don't.
Well, I do. I have to respect you for me to like your message. That's just me though. It could just be me. It's a me thing for sure. But
the underlying message of Gary Vee is work harder. The underlying message of David Goggins is that your mind is lying to you about how much it hurts or how much you can handle or that you want to quit. So there's that underlying message there, which has a lot of value, even if you don't like the person.
Yeah, sure. Whatever you say.
He's rolling his eyes.
They've actually done some neuro research on David Goggins, which is really interesting when you hear Andrew Huberman, who still won't return my message, to get him on the podcast.
I'm not connected to him, or I would help you.
I know, man. I wish. You know what? I bet Shallow knows him. They were at Stanford together. But yeah, he did. He's done some research on Goggins with. They're doing like really cool virtual reality fear inoculation research out there at their lab. And David was one of those guys where he came in and he was scared of sharks, and like one of their VR things is like, you're in there with sharks. And he was the first person to volunteer, even though he was horrified of sharks. And they found that he's able to bypass a lot of the neurotransmitters that, feed into your system to tell you to start quitting and stuff. And somehow psychologically, he's been able to train himself to bypass through those things. And it just goes to show, right? Like you can train yourself to do fucking damn near anything that your mind is willing to stop you from. But you can't train. Well, one thing I have to focus on now, which you probably can train, I have to do more research on it after my tournament yesterday, is how to combat a incredibly huge spike of adrenaline and still maintain some type of parasympathetic tone so that you don't gas out 30 seconds into a match, because
Ooh, interesting.
it was fucking ridiculous. So like, and I understand the whole concept of how things start with sympathetic tone, and, you know, it releases epinephrine and releases adrenaline and all that stuff. I get it. I understand it. But man, we were doing in training like 6 rounds, 8 minutes apiece, and I was good. Like, I never really got tired. And I was like, all right, my tournament, since I'm an old fuck, they're letting us do 5-minute rounds. I'm like, I can just go hard the entire time. No, I fucking gassed out so bad. Like, it wasn't even gassing out. It was like I could not catch my breath because my heart rate was beating so much and so fast that it just felt like I was hyperventilating in a calm state. It was the weirdest thing, man. It was fucking weird. And then I talked to a bunch of the guys afterwards, and they're like, yeah, it's just, you know, it's like,
it's just a matter of experience. I know they tried several methods. I mean, that sounds like the premises of the altitude masks and the hypoxia training that like Vanderlei Silva used to do, where they would tape the mouth shut and just work on their breathing and try and calm their system. And it didn't prove to be very effective, at least from a chemical standpoint, you know, but mentally people get more prepared because they're used to that. So I think that just goes to show you that it's just a matter of being in that experience more often, to where you put yourself under that pressure and you're able to come back from it and realize things are okay. The adrenaline dump is there, that you're going to be fine and survive it. So it probably just sounds like the more you expose yourself to that, the more comfortable you'll become with it.
For sure. It's just a matter of, you know, I think it's also the exposures in concession. I don't think it's like if I do it once and then I wait another year to do it, it'll probably have a similar effect. But if I do it and then I find another tournament to do in a month and then another month, I think it would serve me better to do that. That way it's immediate inoculation. And then I would be a little bit more comfortable with it. Cause there was a guy who I roll with all the time. He's a blue belt. He's fucking really good. And
you sure he's a blue belt? He may have gotten his black belt while you were gone. You just didn't know, and you're diminishing his, results.
No. Because we were in the same class together. We go to school together. He actually made fun of me several times at the tournament yesterday. But he did.
That's actually what it was.
Yeah,
it wasn't a adrenaline dump. It was just shame and humiliation.
Right. Yeah. Don't wear a backpack into a jiu-jitsu tournament, because apparently that's fucking weird. But anyways, he did a second match, won, and just fucking ran off the mat and puked because he had that huge adrenaline spike. And I've heard that through so many people, and it's like, man, and I thought I was good, like, but you know, and it could be too, like, as soon as the match starts, you start holding your breath, you start like doing things that you don't normally do because you're outside your comfort zone. Apparently I decided to pick one of the like best, it's like the second biggest tournament in the world for my first tournament. So that didn't help.
Outside of is it Mundial or Mundials? I don't know how it's pronounced in Brazilian, but MUND, like IAL is like the big jiu-jitsu thing in the world.
No, I think you just made that up. I think you just watched like a Van Damme movie and just made that up. No, within IBJJF, it's Worlds and then Pan Ams. Just like in powerlifting, there's several federations, but I think IBJJF is like the most well-respected one. And it's drug tested. So apparently your boy's drug tested, drug-free lifter.
You should go compete in the USAPL.
I should. I turned in my certificate that I got from my jiu-jitsu tournament.
You're good.
Good. But yeah, I got to do some research into that, because you obviously can't perform to your capabilities when you let the stage get the best of you, you know, nerves, adrenaline, all that stuff. And that's the same thing with powerlifting. Although I've never quite felt that in powerlifting. The only time I felt something like that was when we got hit with an IED in Iraq, and everything just like went in slow motion. Like you see in the movies where everything starts to go in slow motion. That legit happened. And that's just from a immense spike in adrenaline, and everything just starts to slow down. And that's what it reminded me of. And I just got to figure out a way to fix that beyond just inoculation to it. Because I don't like not being able to fix something and be able to put my best foot forward because of something that maybe I can fix. I just never thought about. I never thought that my fucking heart would be in my throat and I wouldn't be able to breathe.
Yeah, it was a chemical response. It wasn't necessarily a training response because, like you said, you were conditioned to go 8-minute rounds over and over and over again. But when the adrenaline spike hit, there was no coming back from that. Your body didn't want to calm down.
Yeah. So looking into that, if anybody has any cool research articles or anything like that relating to that subject matter, definitely send it my way. But that's like my focus for the next month of just reading that, because there's the next tournaments in Atlanta and end of November. And I think I'm going to do that one if people sign up for it.
If people sign up for it?
Well, because they have
because of COVID?
No, I don't. I just might be like it's an Atlanta tournament. And the last one was in 2016. So maybe it's just not a big tournament. You know, you'll probably get like over 200 people signed up, but how many will be in my age group and my weight class?
Oh, we're competing by age group and weight class.
Yeah, man, I'm not doing open. Those guys would fucking murder me.
I'm competing in the open class.
It's different. That's totally different. These young kids would fucking murder me. I went against last week. I went against Gracie lineage. He came down. I'm gonna butcher his name because it's fucking Portuguese, but I think it's Hiron, but it's spelled Rayron or something like that.
They're all with an H sound, even though it's R.
Yeah, Hiron Gracie. And I got to roll with him, and he's like a 220 guy. And he was probably going like 40%. And he just fucking murdered me. And he's like 30 pounds less than me. The thing about being in the super fat guy category, because in jiu-jitsu, 222 and above that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm 240. My first opponent was 340. I'm like,
wow.
Listen, if this guy gets on top of me, I am fucked, man. I was definitely the smallest guy there. So I got to get down. The goal is to get down to 218, 220 so I can compete at 222. Because you got to weigh in as like 10 minutes before your match with your gi on. You got to make weight. So I got to get down to like 218, 219 so I can make weight. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try.
That's terrible. You shouldn't do it. You should, you're getting close to being not even a man according to your standards. So you should just stay up there.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
All right. You think we should answer some topical questions?
Let's get to some questions.
Bullshitting.
Insightful bullshitting is pretty magical stuff, to say the least.
Introspective, thought-provoking bullshit. That's the caption for this headline, this episode.
You got the good questions this week, so go ahead and fire off the ones you want to start with.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at before we just started to make sure I had the questions pulled up. So let's see. First, I just want to knock this out of the way. This is how the question is actually written. But how to keep lats tucked the fuck back on deadlifts, exercise to strengthen that, Q. I'm like, dude, literally just 3 days ago, I put a video up on this. It's the second video on my page. Stop being fucking lazy. So whatever your dude name is, eat carbs or whatever, go check that out. There's a whole drill there with the band or the hip circle that will teach you how to activate your lats with deadlift. Simple as that. Shout out to Dalton because he sends us so many questions every week that are thought-provoking. And this is a good one because it's something that I've been incorporating a little bit more into my programming for some athletes right now. How have you gone about introducing the RPE system to athletes who have not used it before?
Oh, converting it to RPE. I like it.
No, I mix them. I blend them. So will do a top set at an RPE, and then all the volume work I'll do at a certain percentage. That way,
based
when
off
someone's
of that RPE or based off of
no, just off their actual percentage work. So I can go off of Proudprint's chart still and have them do a certain amount of work at the volume I want them to do, but I let them touch a weight in a certain zone. And, if they're far out, it might be like 5 reps, 4 reps, 3 reps. If they're closer, it might be like 1, 2, or 3 reps, depending on where they're at in their training cycle. It's not something that everyone has taken too well. It frustrates the shit out of half the lifters because they can't judge it. And I'm like, listen, I'd rather see you undershoot it right now than overshoot it. But I usually will send them a chart that I like to use for the RPE chart. Of course, it comes from the Borg scale. The rate of perceived exertion with Borg scale is actually 1 through 20. And Mark Teixeira used it and dropped it down. 6 through 20? I didn't know that. So Mark Teixeira had kind of condensed it down to 1 through 10. And, it's very subjective. There's a lot of times where, you will move a weight and it will move really, really fast, but it could feel heavy to you. And that's what people don't understand. So you're going off of the subjective thing. What drives me nuts about RPE is people are like, I want to hit 350 at an RPE 8 today. And it's not what you want to hit. It's how it feels under the bar and how it's moving. So I do like the RPE aspect because it makes the lifter very self-aware and subjective to how they feel under the bar, which I think is kind of important long-term, because we've talked about auto-regulation on this podcast a lot. And so I will usually give lifters 5% variance. So if their weight calls for, let's say, 3x4 at 80% and it's moving pretty easy, they can go 82.5%, they can go 85%. Or if it's feeling like shit, they can drop it down to 75% so they can move it well. That's how I prefer to auto-regulate. I've been incorporating a lot of RPE to a couple of lifters and having them try it. Some are going wild. They love it. They're like, man, this top set feels good. It's allowing me to hit something comfortable. And then I do the volume work. It feels so much better because I'm primed. And there are other people who just freak the hell out and they're constantly missing a lift and failing. I'm like, listen, it says RPE 8.5 and it was supposed to be a triple and you only got 2. That's a fucking 10. You know? They're like, well, I felt like I could hit this. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't hit it. You totally missed it. You misunderstood the whole concept
Ego.
of RPE. Yeah, it's ego. It's rate of disease. Like if you know the number you want to hit at an RPE before you get to the gym, you're not using RPE. You're using your dick. It's literally just you using your balls to say, this is what I'm going to hit. That's not an RPE skill.
Right.
As you're warming up, as you're moving, you see how you feel and you see how the bar is moving. That's your RPE skill. And by the way, everyone who ever posts RPE snacks, RPE air on Instagram, you're full of shit. If you're shaking and you're grinding, it is not snacks. It is not air. It's a freaking 9.
I don't even know what that means. So
it's this cool hip kids lingo thing where they want to act like they're moving something fast.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. When they call things spicy too, like, oh, this is a spicy workout. I'm like, man, your butthole's going to hurt later if it's that spicy. God.
Yeah. So, it first is if you put the RPE scale in there, I wouldn't say jump just to RPE. There are some programs out there like a daily undulating periodization, which are almost entirely RPE based. You're going to do 3 sets of 7 at RPE 7 this block. And then the next block, we're going to come it down, or not, I shouldn't say block, but week. Next week it might be 3 times 7 on RPE 8 or whatever it is. It's all subjective. So that way you're not stuck. Like if I have 3 times 7 at 70%, you're using 70%. It helps you out. You can plan ahead of time. You know how it should move and how it should feel. With an RPE, it makes a lot of lifters uncomfortable because they're trying to guess how it's actually moving. And for someone who's a very calm lifter, they usually do very, very well with RPE. Someone who's a very emotional lifter, like their outside factors get to them, like myself, it's not always a great system because if they're carrying a lot of emotion in there, things could feel heavier. They might be using less than 70% for that 7 reps and feel like it's an 8 or 9 when it actually probably isn't, but it's just because their head's there. So there's a lot it's one of those things where one size doesn't fit all. If you have the ability to be and moderate your training intensity, RPE is probably a good system for you because when you're feeling your best, you can push it. And when you're not, you're not. If you are not able to regulate and modulate, then percentages probably do better for you to make sure you get that work, but give yourself that range in the percentages, even if it's 1 or 2%. I don't need someone to stick to, if the percentage works out to 300, I'm not going to be mad if they use 305. I'm not going to be mad if they use 295. They're getting in the quality workload. But if it's an RPE 7 and you're hitting failure, and you're not supposed to, I'm going to be mad because you're way overshooting.
Right. Yeah.
You're not even coming close. So it's really a conversation as a coach is, hey, do you want to try this? Here's the benefits of it. Here's the scale I'd like to use. And let's see if you can match it. If not, if you're struggling with it, we'll pull it away. But for at least this training block, let's give it a shot and see how you feel with it. As a coach, that's how I would.
Yeah. So the question is, how would you start to incorporate RPE into someone's training?
How I like to use it would basically be top set.
What's the question? Because you don't answer the question sometimes. The question is, how do you incorporate RPE training into someone's program who hasn't used it before? So you gave a brilliant example of the benefits of RPE versus the benefits.
Right.
But how would you bring that into someone's training is the question.
Okay. The way I brought it into most lifters' trainings is usually on their main lift. I've given them a set to do before the volume at a given RPE. So basically I'm using it as a primer set. So let's say their volume work for the day was the example I used 3 times 7 at 70%. I might give them, let's say, an RPE set of 3 at RPE 8 before that. So like a heavier primer set in RPE 8 and see how they move it. But it's not fatiguing them to the point. It's an RPE 8. So they're going to have a few reps left in the tank, but it's allowing them to touch a little bit heavier weight before they get to the volume. Yeah. So it's almost a way to incorporate, for me, how I like to use it anyways, almost a way to incorporate a little post-activation potentiation by having them touch a slightly heavier load without fatiguing them and then having them come back down to the volume load.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So Trevor hit on some really good points when it comes to RPE. The Borg scale, yeah, like you said, 6 to 20, and that was incorporated because most people's heart rate between 60 to 200. So that's kind of where the Borg scale goes, because it was based on more aerobic capacity training,
stuff,
yeah, where Mike Teixeira kind of brought it into the powerlifting realm. And I think a lot of people are shifting away from RPE into reps in reserve, and then also into velocity and a bunch of stuff. It's just a way to auto-regulate. That's all it is, where percentages don't really allow you to auto-regulate as much unless you give them a wave like you do. But I think if you're looking for RPE, the biggest benefit to me is it's allowing me to understand how are you internalizing exterior stressors and how your body's recovering session to session. So that's what RPE allows me to do. So if you're supposed to hit an RPE 8, a single at RPE 8, you might be able to correlate that with 80%, but say you only hit 70% that day. That's telling me that, hey, maybe you're not getting the best sleep. Maybe you're stressed out. Maybe your nutrition is not good. So it's indicators. It's going to allow you to find more indicators of you really not doing things outside of the gym to check those boxes so that you're able to progress. And that's where a lot of people have those issues is like, well, I did 315 for 5 at an 8 last week, and now you have me doing 8.5 to 9 for a set of 5. I should be doing more. It's like, well, maybe, or maybe you went out on the weekend and Monday you're dehydrated and you didn't have any food and you just went to the gym because whatever, so like that's the idea of RP. It's for definitely more for analytical minded people who think about things outside of the gym, where the people who can't concentrate, who apparently can't add weights to bars, and those type of people who like aren't really ever paying attention when they're in the gym, percentages probably be a better bet for them. But if you want to incorporate it and you have someone who is a percentage based athlete, the best way that I found to incorporate it is to start offering them RPE ranges along with their percentage ranges so that they can get an idea of, okay, well, if I'm doing 70 to 75% for a set of 5 to 8 reps, that should feel like an RPE 7 to 8 if I'm fully recovered. And then you have them check in with you at the end of every week and say, hey, how did this set feel? Mostly for your top sets. No one cares about your warm-ups. Trevor's made that perfectly clear. No one cares about your warm-ups. Do not let us know how your warm-ups are going. And then that way we can discuss like, okay, well, these are the rep ranges. This is what the RP should be if you're fully rested. Clearly, you overshot it a couple of times this week. What are some factors that could have led to that? And then slowly, by asking them those questions, is going to allow them to figure out, how RP is working for them and what are the things they have to think about and understand for them to be more successful at RP. Because it's not hard. They've done some research that shows people, the more often they do it, the closer they get to reps in reserve, being like on the money for any type of trained lifters. One of the studies, I'm not good at like just telling you the name of the study with the authors unless I have a sheet in front of me where I've done my research beforehand. But there was a study where I think the first set they were doing a set of 5 to 8 reps or 8 to 10, something like that. And they had to get within 2 reps in reserve, and they got pretty close between the 2 groups. And then the second set, they got even closer. So it's not that hard of a system. You just have to be in the headspace to be able to gauge, well, this is moving this way, this is moving that way, and what should my next jump be based on how it feels? And that's something that you have to continuously ask yourself as a lifter in between sets to get your best RPE. And it gives you so much feedback mechanisms. It's like, okay, well, I felt stiff under the bar. Maybe I should warm up a little bit more. Or, man, the plate felt really good today, so I'm going to feel good. And then, 2 plates, kind of felt heavy. Maybe let me watch the video. Did I shift? Did I do something wrong? So it makes you start to be more of an analytical, more of a thinker. Whereas like if your percentages, it's typically like bar, I just got to work up to my percentage and then hit that. And then that's the set I care about, where RPE is like every set matters because it's giving you a bunch of feedback. But yeah, that's how I like to incorporate it. And then eventually, if the person really likes RPE, we'll drift away from percentages and just stay with RPE. But I think having both of those things in there first to kind of allow them to figure out how percentages match RPEs, which I think Mike Tresera has a really good, I think it's a free PDF on that, because you'll have some people who will Google RPE and percentages and it's like, oh, 85% is a RPE 8.5. I'm like, no. What if you're doing a set of 8? Like, is that 85% going to be the same as 70? Like, that doesn't match up evenly. So I think Mike has it where percentages matches with reps, which matches with RPEs. So that kind of give you a good idea. But that's kind of how I would incorporate it.
Yeah. And it also allows you to take weight off the bar, which most people don't do. That's the problem with RPE, is most people use it to put more weight on the bar. But let's say you have a system that is entirely RPE based and it calls for 4 sets of 8 and RPE 9 or 8 or whatever it is. If you start fatiguing as the sets go on, that would mean to stay with that RPE, you might have to take 5 to 10 pounds off the bar to stay within that RPE. So it means your first 2 sets may have been heavier than your last 2 sets. It doesn't mean keep adding, keep looking till you get to that point. And that's where most people tend to make the mistake with RPEs. They keep adding to the bar.
Yeah. Same thing like you do. When you do RPE, you should have a gauge where it's like 0.5. So if you give them an RPE 8, they can go up to RP 8.5 and then down to RP 7.5.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I tell people is it's okay to be close. You don't have to get it exact. Be close.
Yeah. And typically the idea is like, well, if you have to go down from your top set, then it's probably not legitimately what you thought it was.
Right.
And those are feedback mechanisms, or you're out of shape, or you're not resting too long enough. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So, play around with it. You can do what Trevor did. I like what Trevor's doing with the top single. Is a really good way to introduce it. And then if that doesn't work, you can try the way. But you have 2 different ways to introduce it that have been successful for both of us. So.
Yep. All right. So let's see some weird questions here. Advice for older lifters getting into powerlifting, 40 in 2021.
I don't know. I can't really say.
Well, so what Tony's saying is most people are getting out of powerlifting at that point.
Yeah. I would say, are you looking to lower your quality of life and become very unathletic? Then you just push powerlifting to the forefront. When you're at 40 years old, there's a lot. How long have you been lifting? What's your training history? Do you have any injuries? What are your limitations? Those are the things that I would think about first and foremost. And that's the things that I would fix. As you get older, your accessories are going to look more like rehab stuff and prehab stuff than they are going to be accessories anymore. And your volume is going to diminish because you're not going to be able to recover the same way that you used to. So you may start looking like one of those super heavyweight lifters that only squats heavy once a week, but does light deadlifts. And then the next week does light squats and heavy deadlifts. Those are the things you're going to have to play around with as you become an older lifter. He said he's new to powerlifting.
Yeah, he's a newer powerlifter. Yeah. He'll be turning 40 next year.
Yeah, so it's just like anything, if you're a newer lifter, you got to get the technique down. And as an older lifter, you're going to have, I would assume, some wear and tear. I would say most powerlifters played sports at some degree. That's how they got into lifting for the most part. So there's going to be some wear and tear. There's going to be some degeneration. Obviously, as you get older, your body starts to work against you. One of the things as an older lifter is you're going to have to increase your protein because your rate of protein turnover is going to be a little bit higher, or protein breakdown, not turnover. If you're an enhanced 40-year-old, which you probably should be, if you're over, I think 32 to 35, I would start looking at HRT clinics and stuff like that. That can help with a lot of things. So I would look at that, get your blood work done, see if you need any type of enhancement. Do it through a TRT doctor, because the stuff nowadays is fucking super shady thanks to coronavirus. All these underground labs are fucking hurting right now. So, shout out to all the good sources out there. We appreciate you guys. I know my blood work's not going to be fucked up, but yeah. So that's what I would focus on, is just making sure that you're able to move without pain. And that should be the forefront of all your exercise selections and all your weight selections is, does it cause pain? Because unfortunately, you're not going to recover as fast as the other person,
Yeah.
the younger guys will. So you have to be very, very smart with your exercise selection, very, very smart with your load. And most of the time, you're going to be under training. You're not going to be pushing things. Especially as a newer lifter, I'd rather you accumulate good volume with the specificity of the exercises to get that technique down, to get everything ingrained before trying to push the intensity and push the volume on those exercises. So I would think about microdosing, higher frequency type training, just with extremely lower loads in the first year or so, and trying to push your accessories that don't require a lot of stability to get stronger. And then that way you're just really good at the exercises, you're staying healthy. And by the time you have some competency within the first year or two, which hopefully at 40 years old, you're not the young kids that are like, oh, I just want to compete as soon as I start the sport. It's like, well, hopefully you have some patience. And then from there, you can start pushing things once you're able to figure out, where the issues are, what are some of the commonalities of those issues, and if you can troubleshoot them. But yeah, that's what I would do in terms of thinking about how would I progress if I started at 40 years old.
I think it was an interesting approach, and I'll break it down into layman's terms for people who don't understand what you just said. But you talked about microdosing the main lifts and basically maximizing the bodybuilding work, the accessory work around that, so it's less wear and tear on the joints. So what Tony means by that when he says microdose the main lifts is like, that's very popular right now to have higher frequency training, squatting 3 days a week. And as a 40-year-old person, you're probably not going to be able to squat heavy or higher intensity 3 days a week without seeing a significant amount of body pain and wear and tear. So Tony was talking about using those as technique training days with very submaximal loads. Like it could be as simple as 3 times 3 at 65 or 70%. It's not meant to be heavy. You're going to maximize the accessory work. So let's take an Ed Cohn type approach there, where he was starting his training cycle at like 60 or 65% and doing a good amount of volume. He was doing like 5x5 at 60, 65%. And most people are like, well, 5x5 at 65% isn't very tough on a back squat. It's like, exactly. He didn't want it to be. He would ramp up towards the meet as he went. So he would then maximize the accessory work after that, which was hypertrophy based. So he would maximize the leg press load. He would maximize, lunges or leg extensions, which, people now are like, leg extensions. Like, yeah, he was really maximizing the bodybuilding work in the beginning of his phase and then reducing the bodybuilding work loads lower and maximizing the weight of the main lifts the closer he got to a competition. That's what his linear progression was. He started the main movements light, so he didn't have a lot of wear and tear going into peak, and then he would peak with them very, very heavy and taper back the amount of intensity he would use on the bent rows, the shoulder presses, the leg presses, the pec flies and whatever. So he wasn't putting a lot of wear and tear on his joints from the accessory movement. So that's how a 40-year-old should probably look at this, is starting with microdose loads of the main lifts to build proficiency and motor pattern, but really try to maximize as much strength potential as possible through the bodybuilding work of, machine rows, pull-ups, pull-downs, whatever it is, shoulder raises, shoulder presses with dumbbells, things that are more joint friendly for the individual, not being stuck doing a standing military press, which might be hard on a 40-year-old shoulders, but he can probably do machine overhead presses or dumbbell Arnold presses. He's going to find more joint friendly specific movements and do them to a higher intensity with a hypertrophy for specific, muscle size, which is potential strength for later mindset, and then taper out. The good thing about being 40 is you've already learned how to develop patience. You don't need to be strong tomorrow. You know how to do something for 5, 6, or 7 weeks at a time in those blocks, or in that case, more like 16 weeks and more like 20 weeks. You're no longer a child, so you're not impatient. You know that things take time. So start looking for ways to plan out long-term that time. If you love powerlifting and you just started and you're 40, it doesn't mean you can't progress and get stronger. It just means you probably shouldn't do what the 20-year-old is to get stronger. The 20-year-old can handle a daily undulating periodization model and high frequency with heavier loads and no accessory work, and they're going to get neurologically efficient, but the breakdown is a much more rapid rate. There's a lot of people online who have daily undulating periodization programs or high frequency programs, and the breakdown is very, very significant because they're not actually recovering from it, or the tendonitis in their knees and their elbows high because they're constantly doing the comp lifts at a high threshold, which from the argument of specificity makes a lot of sense. But we always talk about that. The longer you spend in the sport, you should probably do that towards your strength and peaking phases closer to a meet and take some of the time off season to build around that. That's going to help you have some longevity in this.
Yeah, one of the things Trevor just touched on too, that just to expound upon that, is like, if you do start to do these exercises and you feel achy, try to deviate from that for like a week or two until you feel good again. Like, the idea that one of the bad things about powerlifting is we get caught up in specificity being the number one driver of how to get better, which it is for sure. But you know what, above that, the number one driver for improvement is injuries, right?
Yep.
So we're so scared to miss a squat workout that if our knees and backs fucked up, we're going to squat anyways. I would just caution you as an older lifter, if you start to feel some aches and some pains, a lot of time that's because you're reaching a volume tolerance or volume threshold that your tissue tolerance isn't quite ready for. So then you would want to slow things down, maybe add in some tempo work, maybe add in some pauses to lighten up the load, or just completely go away from that exercise and find one that doesn't cause the same injuries or the same flare up for like a week or two. Then reintroduce those exercises back in at a lower volume, lower intensity until you find that sweet spot of like where you're able to progress and not overdo it without having the injuries. That's something that's really important as an older lifter, because recovery is going to be like just the number one thing. So don't feel like you have to do the exercises if they're starting to beat you up.
Yep.
One of the questions we had was, because we're bench specialists in this program here. Well, I had a decent bench when I was competing, but I think right now Riley can outbench both of us. So if you're going to ask us about bench press, here comes some mediocre answers for you. But we had a guy who's going to bench press only, and he prefaced it saying that he knows we don't respect single lifters, which we don't, nor should you. You shouldn't respect yourself after this. How would your training change if you're only focused on bench press only? And my answer would be, the idea is like, oh, well, then I can bench press more, right? Because I don't have all these other things taken away from my ability to recover. And this kid's pretty strong bencher. He's going to be benching 500 pounds, which is a strong bench regardless of your weight class. So the idea of adding in more frequency doesn't necessarily sound that great. I think if you're benching twice a week already, then just continue to bench twice a week. You might be able to add in a third day, but I wouldn't go crazy and add, like, I haven't seen anyone add in a fourth day of bench or a fifth day of bench and it be a very successful thing. I think 2 to 3 is kind of where I've seen anecdotally and where the science kind of shows is that sweet spot for bench press, but it's still about load management. So I think the great thing about when you're becoming a single lift lifter, is there a better way of saying that? Single lift lifter? No, that's why it's a stupid thing to do.
Yeah. If you're like bench only, deadlift only. I mean, there's charity events and opportunities for like a bench only meet, but if you're literally just doing bench only,
if it doesn't roll off the tongue, you shouldn't do it. But whatever, we'll keep going. So so when you're doing bench press only, you want to maximize the attempts at the bench press movement. So having the frequency spaced out, and it could look something like, you do 3 sessions of bench press every 8 days instead of 7. People get locked into like, oh, this is my split for the week. And it's like, well, there's more. There's like 10 days. You can do 10-day splits. You can do 8-day split. Like, so
as a single lift, that really benefits them to space that out. So instead of like you're getting at, instead of going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is a lot of benching jammed in one week, they can go Monday, Thursday, Tuesday kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So that's the way I would look at it in setting up your plan. So you can even undulate. You can go heavy, volume, and then speed work if that's what you like, or you can just keep things at a progression and just do variations and progress those variations. So you could have one day is pause bench press, the next day is close grip bench press, and then the next day is incline bench press. And then you can just try to linear progress those and rest accordingly so that you're able to progress them. That's the biggest thing when it comes to any type of program, is like, are you able to progress your lifts? If the answer is no, then you're probably not recovering enough between sessions. So then you have to either elongate your sessions, meaning add more space to them. So if you're taking 48 hours to recover, maybe you need to go to 72, or you need to reduce the volume within those sessions and figure out which exercises are you picking that's going to diminish your ability to recover. So that's one of the things when you go into a single lift is the idea of doing more is there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best idea. And like anyone who wants to increase frequency, like we always say, increase frequency at first, but keep volume the same until you get used to that improvement in frequency. Then once you get used to that, the next block is when you can start improving or increasing the volume. And then the next block, you can continue to go that route. And you may only do it in certain blocks. You may do like a 8-week block, 2 mesocycles of higher frequency benching. And then you may deload that into like an 8-week peak for a bench press where you're only benching twice a week. The stronger you get, the more recovery you're going to need. There's a lot of variables that go into it. So we can't really ever give specifics, but we can definitely give you things to think about in terms of trying to do your own programming. What do you have for this?
I think you covered a lot of it, but the big trap when you fall into preparing for a single lift is you tend to always max that one lift on a weekly basis, and that's going to regress you faster than it's going to progress you. You've reached a point of diminishing returns. Riley and I were literally just having a conversation about this yesterday, and everything tends to work, but it doesn't work forever. So when you're doing things like that, like maxing out every week, it's probably going to work for less than 4 to 6 weeks before you start regressing from it and breaking you down. So you were talking about the way he can undulate is, if he's going to do a heavy bench and he's a pretty good bencher, if he's already benching 480 and working his way to 500, he probably only wants to take that heavy bench every other week. So if he's going to go in and say Monday and do his heavy bench, and then he's only going to bench heavy once a week, that week, then the following bench workout that same day next week, if he doesn't spread it out, the training cycle might be better off being volume work. No. So, and that's the big trap with the frequency is those other lifts should also be variations of, not necessarily the competition lift. So just hypothetical because it's easier math. If he's going to bench twice a week, he may want to take Monday as the heavy or volume bench day. And then the following bench day during the week, it may want to be a very hypertrophy specific because muscle size is muscle potential. So he may want to have a dumbbell focused, dip focused, shoulder press focused day where he's building muscle size for that potential. And then that way he's only doing a heavy bench every other week. So Monday he does his heavy pause bench work. Let's say Thursday he does dumbbell presses, dips, chest flies, shoulder presses, raises, whatever, and tricep work. And then he comes back the following Monday and he does a good amount of volume work, like 5x5 at 70 to 75%. So he's actually building volume there. And then he comes back the following week and he does the same thing, but now it's his heavy bench again. So that would be something I would look at because you're looking to progress the lift and you're looking to progress it a little bit more in the long term. You're not going to go from 480 to 500 in one training cycle. So plan it out the same way you would a long-term training cycle of, somewhere between 12, 16 or 20 weeks, whenever the meet is. But if you're going to go in there and just try and take a maximum bench every single week, it's probably not going to go well for very long. Things are going to start aching, tendonitis builds up, or you go backwards. That's one of the reasons why I don't personally use conjugate for myself anymore, because I did what I did strongman. Conjugate worked very, very well when I was doing strongman because I was maxing something, every week. It was probably like maxing my overhead for the log press or maxing my deadlift kind of thing. It worked very well for that aspect, but the older I got, the less maxes I can take without really breaking down wear and tear wise. So I prefer like more of an undulation for myself now and the more frequent deloads every 4th week. This guy didn't give us a lot of information on how he's currently lifting. He didn't give us information on his training age or why he's considering bench only. He may not have any legs. I don't know. In which case, it's great that he's actually doing bench only because he's doing something. But, we don't know a lot of where he's coming from to tell him where to go from here. So what I'm looking at that is think in the long-term development. If your bench only meet isn't in 4 weeks, if it's 12 weeks or 16 weeks out, how can you plan that to take maybe a heavy bench only every other week instead of every week, because you'll burn yourself out too fast if you do that.
Yeah. And another thing to consider too is, when people tend to reduce their volume in the other lifts because they're trying to move the main lift that they're focusing on forward, don't necessarily think like, well, I should add more because that's going to, maybe the fact that you're reducing volume in the other lifts is going to allow you to recover and you'll get exponentially stronger by not even adding anything new, just by reducing the volume of the other lifts so that every time you're fully recovered for your bench press. Whereas before, a lot of lifters, we usually bench after we squat. We never bench first in the week. We usually, do some type of bench after the lower body main movements, which probably will fry us. So we're never really benching at our full capacity. So the fact that you're going to actually be bench press training at your full capacity and you're not trying to push your squat and deadlift, which you should still do if you do plan on, you should just do it anyways. Even if you are going to be bench press only for the rest of your life, you should be doing some leg training and back training. Yeah.
It just doesn't have to be very intense or high volume. You can go in there and have 1 day a week of squats and deadlifts. And literally it could be just like SSB squats for 3 sets of 10 at 55% just to maintain some movement, and a trap bar deadlift, same kind of thing, just to get something through them, because it does. Being total body strong is going to help you on every lift. And the legs are involved in the bench press if you're pushing through your legs.
Yeah. So definitely a couple things to think about is, maybe the recovery is going to allow you to just be stronger without changing anything. If you're going to add more volume in and more frequency, do it in a manner that actually allows you to recover session to session and Don't necessarily think of training in a weekly progression, but think of how can I set my days up so that they run evenly. So you may only bench heavy every fifth session. Don't be like, oh, I got to bench heavy every Monday. So think of those things. Hopefully it works out for you. Hopefully you get that 500-pound bench press, but it doesn't really matter because you didn't do it in a full powerlifting meet. But hey, kudos for you, man. Congratulations.
Me, rude. All right. All right. How do you avoid scraping your shins on sumo? I feel like I'm too close to the bar. Well, you probably are too close to the bar, and you can't avoid scraping your shins if the bar isn't tight to you. That's why we wear long socks in competition. Chances are you're going to scrape them, and a deadlift bar knurling is pretty aggressive. Deal with it.
It hurts. It hurts, Trevor. So what you want to do? What you want to do is you want to go into it, and you want to be in a supinated grip position. And then as soon as you lift it, you want to think like front raise away from me as hard as humanly possible. Maybe try to curl it too. And that'll keep it as far away from your shins as possible. But your deadlift's going to go to shit really fast.
Or your biceps are going to go bye-bye.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing if his shins are bothering him, his deadlift's probably not that strong. That's just an assumption. You could have a better deadlift than me, which is not hard to do.
It's all about the total, sir. That's what matters. It's about the total.
Yes.
This goes back to what we talked about with RPE a little bit, and we brought this up. Is there value in a heavier top set, all focusing on a hypertrophy specific block? So he's focused on hypertrophy. Should he still do a top set? And I think there is value in that as long as you're not too beat up or having a lot of tendonitis. I do like a top set with a slightly heavier load because you do get that post-activation potentiation effect, which is going to allow you to move more load with more force, recruit more motor units. I know that's something that Ben Pollack has a lot in his current bodybuilding stuff that he's doing. He's doing it with Justin Harris. And I know that's something that, and it comes from like that Dante Trudell years, which is the dog crap training style. The dog crap training style is you would proceed all your volume work with like a heavy, like for let's say, for example, shit and giggles back work. You might do like a heavy rack pull that would overload your back work and then followed up with a shit ton of pull-ups and bent rows and pullovers kind of thing. So they were getting some heavy lifting in there because heavy lifting does, equate strength potentiation. So is it always beneficial? No, I'm not going to say that's always beneficial. It will burn you out eventually to always be lifting something heavy. If you're in a hypertrophy block and you're not beat up and you don't have tendonitis, or maybe you're earlier on in your powerlifting career, absolutely, you can probably use that. But it's an individual thing. Some people do great with hypertrophy, never lifting heavy. Taking bodybuilding, for example, Sean Ray was an amazing bodybuilder who never lifted heavy. He did set after set after set of 10 to 12 reps with full range of motion and was not known to go heavy. Whereas Ronnie Coleman was known to go super duper heavy first and then do a shit ton of volume after that. So what works best for you is going to be best for you. Is it beneficial? Maybe. That's the best answer I can give you is maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on why you're using it. But just to clarify, potentiation, post-activation potentiation, because that gets thrown out a lot, and I don't think people actually fully understand the science behind it. So to actually get the most bang for your buck out of post-activation potentiation, the science shows that you want to do a heavier rep, right? But it can't be so heavy that it deters you from actually being able to do your next exercise. And then also after that heavy rep, it's literally like a 15 to 30 second rest before you do your other stuff. If it goes beyond that, the potentiation starts to lose its effect. So that's something that people need to understand, right? Like if you're doing a single and you're like, oh man, let me take 10 minutes to fucking cool down and do my next exercise. There's no potentiation there. So if you are trying to do it for potentiation purposes, doing that single and then go into maybe a set of leg press, or if you say you stay with squats, too many S's, you can do that and then immediately have somebody take off a couple plates and then take that set to failure. That's going to give you the most out of that potentiation. But another way to think of it in terms of if you are a power lifter and you're trying to accumulate volume within a phase of training, and let's say you're not necessarily taking things to failure, so you don't really know, maybe the progression is not what I think it is, being able to add those singles in every week is going to allow you to gauge your rate of progression as well. So say you're doing an RPE single at a 7 for squats every week, if you're able to add 5 pounds the next time you do it and keep it at an RPE 7, then you know you're making progress. You know that the volume you are doing and the exercises you are choosing is allowing you to get better at that single. So that's going to give you some positive feedback that your program's working. Now, if you're doing a bunch of volume and that single starts to get lower and lower, then that's either telling you that you're training, you're reaching that overtraining state and you need to deload, and you shouldn't be doing that in the first week or two. Then that tells you your volume is too high to begin with. So it can give you, if you treat it as feedback mechanisms and you take it as that, not as like, oh, I did a single, so now I got to do more the next week, or, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, as long as you take it as like actual feedback mechanisms, that's going to allow you to adjust your volume accordingly throughout the week. Is it going to make you better at hypertrophy? No, one single is not going to make you better at hypertrophy, but at least it's going to give you that gauge to know if you're progressing week to week in the right direction, which a lot of people have struggled with. A lot of people don't know, hey, is this work that I'm doing in the off season in this hypertrophy block actually going to translate into me becoming better at my singles? Well, this is a great way of incorporating that in there to figure things out and to make sure, if you're doing that and like, man, these exercises aren't translating at all, then next block, pick different exercises, but you have to be cognizant of that. Like, there has to be a rhyme and a reason to do it. Don't just do singles because you want to do singles. Like, that's not going to accomplish anything.
Right. I mean, the thought process there is if I do more singles, I'll get better at singles.
Which is true. I mean, there's some good research on that for sure.
I got to find it. Alexis, there we go. Alexis asked the good one. What mistakes have you made in your own programming and how did you recover from them?
Oh man, I don't think we have a show long enough to cover this. The greatest thing about being your own coach is you get to be your own guinea pig and you make a ton of fucking mistakes before you let your clients make mistakes. When I first started lifting, I had this mindset of like doing conjugate of, if I missed the lift, I might as well try it like 3 or 4 other times, right? Because I missed it. So I want to be able to hit that lift. So I've done that before. I've done multiple missed lifts doing conjugate, but somehow I'm still able to recover. God, I feel like being young is amazing. So that was one big thing. From a lifting perspective, I would say that in the off season, the mistake I've made was getting too far away from the actual competition lifts in higher rep ranges that created such a lag in load differentials that when it was time to go back to regular squatting and heavy weight, that it didn't translate because maybe I was doing 225 to 315 for sets of 10 to 12 reps with an SSB bar. Whereas if I was just doing regular squats, it could have been 405 to 500 with sets of 10 to 12. So by doing that and training in such low loads, it was harder for me to regain and work my maximal strength up there. And as an advanced lifter, I didn't need that much volume. I didn't need that much hypertrophy work. I needed to maintain more strength and more top end strength, if that makes sense. I needed to be more in the Andrei Milanichev realm of things, where it's like, I don't need a bunch of hypertrophy work in my off season because it's going to lessen the load. And right now I need to be focused on trying to get stronger instead of just trying to get bigger. So that was one of the biggest mistakes I made towards the end, was when my hypertrophy, I was more focused on getting bigger instead of actually getting stronger in rep ranges that actually mattered.
Yeah, mine's the opposite of that, because as I've gotten older, I tend to start putting things I love in there, which is low rep work, because I excel at low rep work and I hate actual rep work. Yeah. Which is funny because when I was a kid, I loved rep work. Like I loved set to 12, 15, and 20 because the burn was insane.
Yeah.
And so now I'm realizing the longer I've been on strength-based or power-based work for just too long, and I need to go back to more higher repetition rep work and put on some muscle size and give my joints a break and give my nervous system a break. And that's one of the reasons why I'm probably breaking down a little bit more this year, is because I've just been in a strength work for 2 years without an actual hypertrophy block for a while.
2 years?
Because I don't like it. We're going on about 19 or 20 months. Yeah. Okay. Since I've done any hypertrophy work.
So a little bit different, because I was more in the realm of like 6 to 12 week blocks of doing 2. So yeah, I mean, 2 years is a fucking long time, man.
It's a long time.
Surprised you're still talking to me, not in a full body cast.
it's one of the reasons why I tend to like to give up my programming every year or two to somebody else and let them run it, is because the biggest mistake that everyone who programs themselves will do, whether they recognize it or not, and you're always going to recognize this in hindsight, not in foresight.
You're going to favor
what you
like.
You're going to do what you like, not necessarily what you need. And because I haven't really been training for a comp from the injury last year, I tended to favor to do what I like and not being subjective into what I actually need, which is a block of hypertrophy work, putting on some muscle size, giving my joints a little bit of a break, because that's not how I like to train these days. I don't like to do that. So I went with strength work and I went with power because that's what I fucking love. I love to go in there and explode, be fast, and do things. So the biggest caveat to being your own coach, and like I said, you're never going to realize this in foresight, it's always in hindsight, is you're going to do what you like instead of what you need.
Yeah.
So after this contest, I compete next week. I fly out next Thursday. I got to figure somebody out, and they're going to get the reins and they're going to get control. So I can't do that. So you're hearing it on the podcast. I won't be the one writing my program next week. I'll probably still put it out there for people. I'll still put a train along out there of what I would do if you want to stay in strength work, but I'm not going to be writing my own specific program.
Yeah. I think a great way to troubleshoot that, because that's the same thing. I love doing the hypertrophy work, because I feel like the heavier stuff just gets monotonous and it's not enjoyable. But I like pushing like to failure on stuff. Is to, if you're going to coach yourself, find a training partner that's going to call you out on your bullshit, be like, hey man, we're doing this for too long. We need to do something else. That way you don't have to retrospectively think like, oh man, I wish I would have done that. If you have someone there that's a really good training partner, they'll be able to do that. But you have to have one that's like Doyle would call me out on my shit all the time because he felt confident enough to do it. Whereas like, I think if you got a training partner that, it would be hard for a training partner to tell you, the Trevor Jaffe.
So I hear
coach of coaches.
That's what I fucking hear from Riley. She's like, yeah, it's hard to tell you what to do. Cause she's like, I'm like, I can see what you need to do and I want to tell you what to do, but you're Trevor.
Yeah. It's like, fucking speak up, because when it comes to programming yourself, you can be your own biggest idiot. You'll do like, there's shit that I have done where it's like, I would never give this to another human being, but it's like, well, fuck it. I think I can push through it, or like, this is what I want to do today. So yeah, finding that person to just call you out on your bullshit. Like I said, I had Sean do that to me quite often. And Riley's smart enough to do that to you. She just has to be able to do that. She has to be able to pull that trigger. And, as a coach, you have to put your ego aside and be like, yeah, you're right.
That's what you're paying for, is that true accountability when you're hiring a coach to tell you when you're off your, you're on your bullshit.
Yeah, I just don't like it.
It's true though. Like I have a lot of lifters who will give me like a little pushback or do things. And I remind them like, hey, these are your goals. This is what it takes. Or this is why you're doing something, just because you don't want to do it doesn't mean you're not going to do it, because you told me this is your goal. So you're going to do it. Otherwise it's not your goal. It's your dream. And I'm pretty blunt and honest with that. So that's just what it is. And I need that accountability factor back of having somebody else saying, hey, you know what? You need this more than you want this. And you're going to have to do this. And I'm not going to like it. And it's going to suck. And I realized that the other day, like, back when I first started lifting, I would do like the empty bar for 20 to warm up squats. I would do, a plate for 10 reps. I do another plate for 10 reps. I do another plate for 10 reps. And then I go to 405 and do like 8 reps, and then go to like 455 and do 6 reps, and then go to like 495 and do 5 reps before I would start taking my top end sets. Now I do the bar for like 5 reps. I'm like, all right, that's too many reps. I got to save energy. So
then it's singles from there on out.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm like, it's like that epiphany moment when I'm warming up in the day, or might've been yesterday. I don't even remember anymore. They all blend together, but I'm like, you know what? I really, really, really need more time under tension and rep work and less specificity right now, because it's been a long time. Because I didn't really put it in perspective, but I did a meet in January of last year, did very, very well. I then was going through some shit and started putting myself into another meet, so I didn't have to focus on that personal life shit. And I was meet prepping and preparing, and that's when I lost the adductor. Okay, so I went to the adductor rehab, and then I was preparing for another meet that was supposed to happen that didn't happen. And then, I was traveling a lot. We had seminars, we're doing things, and then I didn't even think this meet was going to happen. So I wasn't taking it that seriously. I was kind of dicking around for the first few months. And I'm like, wait a minute, this meet's actually going to happen. I should train for it. So I went right back into, strength and peaking blocks and not real hypertrophy work. And my body was breaking down. It's like, no, your body doesn't want to do this anymore right now. It needs some time in between. So yes, I'm competing again in February, but it'll be a much shorter peaking block for that one. I'll probably just peak the last 5 weeks. Everything beyond that's going to be more rep works. And I want to have somebody who's going to make me do like sets of 5 to 10.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a fucking single, double, or triple for a while, because it's what I'm good at already. And I need to train what I'm bad at. And so that's really what the hardest part of coaching yourself is doing. is being able to tell yourself and call yourself on your own bullshit. You mentioned a great thing you had. You had Sean Doyle who would call you on your bullshit, and vice versa. You call Sean on his bullshit.
Yep.
You know, Riley and I train opposite days. We train together, but we train opposite things. She'll be squatting, I'll be benching. So I don't have that training partner aspect where we're doing the same program where they can say, hey, you know what, this is starting to wear down on me, or I'm noticing this on you. Let's change that. And maybe that's something I will do moving forward, is match my training to Riley's. And just, you know, I have an adjustable combo rack for a reason.
Yeah, for sure. That helps out a lot. But yeah, great question, Alexis. At least it's not one to make us think that your training peak is in the dumpster like it the questions have been recently.
The final stage of her peak has gone really well. You know, she had a great deadlift, good. Great bench. Yeah. I think she's just been in her head. Everybody does that. You get ready for meet, you get meet brain. Everybody does that. Jen Rotzinger did that before her last meet. She was on her head, and squats ended up moving easy, bench moved fine, and she ended up passing out a little bit on her deadlift. But it's like you make the worst of it in your mind than it actually is because you're tired, fatigued.
Yeah. All right, that's all the questions we have today, guys. Appreciate all the great questions. If you like the episode, go to iTunes, leave a review and a 5-star rating. Support the companies that support us. Subject Zero Supplements, Iron Rebel, Metrolife, Ritual, Renaissance Periodization, and that is it.
There's a whole bunch in my bio.
Check out Trevor's bio for discount codes on all that stuff. But yeah, appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you for all the great questions. Keep them coming, whether they're during the pop-up box or just DM us the questions. If they're a stupid question, Trevor makes fun of you. If they're great, he'll praise you. So just be ready for that. There's no stupid questions, just stupid people. And that's what we're always going to go with. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one, sir.
Thank you. You too.